right. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I see we have a few folks still trickling in, but thanks for being here for today's webinar, Audits to Implementation. My name is Craig Hagland. I am with the US EPA. I work on the Energy Star Buildings program where I lead a few of our sectors, CRE, multifamily, data centers, a couple other ones. But today I'm the host of this webinar on energy audits. And, we really thought it'd be good to kind of take a step back and look at some of the foundational pieces of energy management programs. Energy audits are sort of critical to, essentially taking a look under the hood of a car and looking at the engine, in the case of buildings, really understanding how a building is operating in terms of energy efficiency. Where are there opportunities? Where are there challenges? Why? Based on the data that you have on the building, answering questions as to how they're operating. From an EPA Energy Star sort of point of view, I imagine most folks on the line have some familiarity with Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And while the tool is great, it gives great insight into performance through benchmarking, allows the evaluation of key metrics, energy use intensities, the 1 to 100 Energy Star score. It really sort of stops at showing you where you might look, but it doesn't tell you why a building might not be efficient. So that's really where energy audits come in, and they come in many forms. These days there are hosts of different providers out there that can conduct an audit. They all have sort of maybe varying scopes and technical details associated with it, costs if you're hiring a third party, and we'll get into some different options today with our presenters. But we wanted to invite a couple of building owners to join and give their insight into audits, not only what they're doing in their respective organizations, but also working to answer some of the questions on challenges that come in with audits. Whether that's how do you prioritize buildings, how do you sort through all the technical complexities, otherwise strategizing around how to make audits work for you, despite a bit of a sort of historical intimidation factor that some people get in terms of looking into the building and getting a host of things and figuring out which ones to focus on. So without further ado, we will get into our topic for today. Next slide, please. So I just sort of covered the introduction. We'll have our panelists up in a minute, and I'll introduce them. But probably going to have around 10 minutes each to give a little bit of an overview from our panelists. And then the remaining time, we'll have some discussion. Certainly encourage you to send questions as you think of them into the chat, and we'll be able to review those and bring them up on our Q&A at the end, and then we'll close it out. Next slide, please. So today, pleased to introduce our two speakers. First up will be Kim Pexton, who's the Sustainability Senior VP at JBG Smith. And then we'll have Hope Duke, who's the Sustainability Senior Associate at Berkshire Residential Investments. All right, I think we'll have Kim kick it off. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy.
Great. Thank you, Craig. So nice to be with all of you today. Just as a quick background on JBG Smith Properties, we are a real estate investment trust. We're based in the DC metro area, and we manage, own, operate, and develop specifically in the DC metro area. So, really here today to talk to you kind of high level about how we as a company look at energy audits across a portfolio that is, we're about 50% commercial office and 50% multifamily. And we really sort of view the energy audit process as a great tool in our tool belt to refine our operations and work to identify capital investments for our planning and budgeting processes on an annual basis. Next slide, please. So fundamentally, from an audit perspective, we really view these, again, as I mentioned, as a tool in our tool belt where we're looking at them to provide transferable knowledge, meaning that if we are doing energy audits strategically across buildings in our portfolio, then many times what we're going to do with that information is we're going to mine the various details with respect to energy conservation measures or water conservation measures and apply those actually across all of our other buildings. So that's one of the ways that we can stretch our investment in some of these studies is to take that knowledge on to other buildings. We fundamentally believe that it is a front line to addressing climate-related risks. We're always in a situation where energy costs are climbing. As we have more heating degree days and cooling degree days, then we're going to be very focused on how can we run our buildings in a way that's ensuring that we're reducing energy consumption as much as possible. And we also do see very specifically that it increases building value or fortifies that building value. Many times with respect to insurance, we need to show that that we have sustainability plans, we have climate-related resilience plans to insurance providers by way of ensuring that our buildings are actually insurable. So those are a few high-level thoughts on how we view energy audits. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is just take you through an example of a multifamily building in our portfolio that does sit in Washington, D.C. proper. The case study here is 1221 Van Street in DC proper, multifamily building, 12 floors. And the interesting thing about this particular building is that, and all of our buildings for that matter, is that we have them all connected to a central building automation system. So what that means is that our engineering team can actually look at the various building systems in all of our buildings at any given time. So we do things through that central automation system, like deploy chiller coasting programs. We're ensuring that we have just-in-time startup for buildings in the morning in the case of our office portfolio. In the case of our multifamily portfolio, if there are spaces within the building that we know are not necessarily occupied in the middle of the night, we can dial back systems, et cetera. So for this particular building, we identified that we needed to do an energy audit, and it was mainly because our engineering team was sort of scratching their heads on, this was a newer delivery for us in the 2016, 2017, 2018 realm. So newer building, but our indicators in Energy Star portfolio manager were suggesting that it was below the threshold or the median for multifamily buildings. And with impending building performance standards, we really needed to understand what we could do to better the position of this particular building. So we engaged a third-party energy audit team to go through the building and help us understand where we could influence in this newer building. Next slide, please. So included, of course, in the various studies and write-ups is the place that we tend to, really laser focus, and that is on the energy efficiency recommendations that are identified for buildings that have been through the audit process. And in the case of this particular building, as I mentioned, it was a newer delivery to us. And therefore, Actual equipment related upgrades were not necessarily items that made the list. So again, we're thinking what exactly can be done. So what you're seeing in this particular snapshot is a list of energy efficiency measures that are very controls based, and it's focused on appropriate set points or refining and tweaking set points for the building, whether it's on a water loop or in our dedicated outside air system. And another point of reference here is that, looking at the Energy Star score, if you're looking at those red numbers, that as of the time of this particular energy audit, our Energy Star score was sitting at a 15. And again, this is a newer building. And so trying to understand how exactly is this happening and where are our opportunities. So we did take a look at there, on the ground floor of this building, there are retail and restaurant operations. So we did go through the process of bifurcating between what is residential and common area and what the building looks like when you do include those other uses in the building. So ultimately, we honed in on those particular set points. So next slide. So how did we take this information and actually translate it into something that our engineering teams can actually utilize and implement at the asset level? Now, I know that you all have been provided these particular slides, so you can actually, on your own, you can have a better picture by looking at this particular slide. But I'll just sort of bear with me, and I'll walk through this with you a little bit. What you're looking at on the right side of your screen is a building performance, asset level building performance plan or report. We have these for every single asset in our portfolio, and it gives an asset manager and it gives an engineering team all of the high level compass points of energy consumption, how much it costs, what the EUI is, various targets. And so within this plan, if you imagine, and I would like to say that it's much more slick than just a spreadsheet, but it's an Excel file. And so on the right side, we have that first tab. And then on a second tab, we actually identify the energy efficiency projects and water efficiency projects. So that's the top right-hand side of your screen. And those particular items and the CapEx report is actually pulled. We use Yardi as our automation tool for various functions across our portfolio. And we actually are able to pull reports on CapEx, what category they're in, whether it's required capital, ROI projects, energy efficiency projects, major and minor HVAC related projects. So we take that information pulled from reports based on what has been planned in a 10-year horizon, and we take a look at that information. And then we also pull in from the energy audit report, that lower right-hand corner, we take those measures and actually also feed that into that Excel spreadsheet so that when engineers are identifying capital for a given year, they can actually go to that energy audit tab and see the menu of items and actually place them in the appropriate year in a 10-year horizon. So then the next step after that is to ensure that they get implemented in the course of a year. And how we actually manage that is that we have meetings with our engineering and operations team on a monthly basis to specifically check in on these projects and understand where they're at in the implementation cycle. So Going on to the next slide, please. Just sort of summing up, with all of the knowledge that we do gain from these energy audits, we're using that information to look at other buildings in the portfolio, but also translate this into our development design guidelines. So anything that we're learning, we're trying to make sure that we're solving for that before a building is actually built. We look at water conservation as part of this. I know energy audit, is very focused on energy, but these audits also do identify water saving features and opportunities as well. We take these opportunities to take a situation or pilot something at the building asset level and kind of incorporate that across our portfolio. And we do view this energy efficiency and water efficiency as sort of the front line to hardening and climate-related resilience for a building. So again, some of the examples from energy audits that we have taken, other than just the automated pieces that were identified for this particular building, we've looked at window to wall ratios very heavily. We still look at that in our development pipeline. And we're also looking at various window films and piloting sort of heat gain related technologies that we can deploy again across the portfolio by doing pilots and then implementing them at scale. So that sort of takes you full circle on how we look at energy audits, how we work to identify measures and incorporate them into our planning process and track them. From here, we're going to hop over to Hope to take you on a little bit of a deeper dive.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim. Hi, everybody. I'm Hope Duke. I'm a senior associate on the sustainability team here at Berkshire. Today, I'll start with a brief introduction to the company and our ESG program before getting into how we systematically approach the integration of energy audits and efficiency programs into our business plans. Next slide, please. So Berkshire is a privately held owner and manager of multifamily real estate in the US. And through our vertically integrated platform, we aim to deliver a best-in-class experience for all of our stakeholders. As you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, Berkshire has both an equity and debt business. And for the purposes of today's discussion, we will be focusing on the equity side. Next slide, please. All of Berkshire's core and value-add strategies fall into our branded ESG program, which we call Berkshire Thrive. We started Berkshire Thrive back in 2018, and the program consists of an integrated set of strategies to help us monitor, track, and enhance our real estate performance. And that's focused on 4 main areas that you can see in the first blue box on the bottom left. Those categories are enhancing resident satisfaction, attraction, and retention within our communities, our commitment to sharing and improving our ESG performance, driving impact from operational efficiencies, risk mitigation, and reducing our environmental footprint, and finally, curating a passionate and positive environment for our team members. We do have some environmental performance goals that help motivate and focus our sustainability efforts. So for all of our multifamily properties, we do strive to achieve a 10% reduction in energy, greenhouse gas emissions, and water, as well as a 30% waste diversion rate, all by 2025 as compared to a 2015 baseline. Those are the goals in the bottom right-hand side of the slide. And also in 2023, all of our core portfolio adopted more ambitious carbon reduction goals of a 50% reduction in Scope 1 and 2 emissions intensity by 2030 over a 2019 baseline, with a commitment to tracking Scope 3 emissions from leased spaces in that same time frame. So pursuing energy efficiency opportunities is essential to achieving these 2025 and 2030 goals. And on the next slide, I'll talk about how efficiency is integrated into each asset's life cycle. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the identification of energy efficiency opportunities starts for us during due diligence for our new acquisitions. As part of our ESG scorecard, we assess the status of energy equipment, which includes how and where natural gas is used, whether Energy Star appliances are installed in units, and how much of the property's lighting is LED. We also do additional research into local utilities to see what, if any, multifamily programs are available that the property may be eligible for. And upon acquisition, when each property is onboarded into the Berkshire Thrive program, this is where the ongoing data tracking that we do on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis can help inform the utility audit and rebate identification process that we outline in the evaluate section of this slide. And it actually leads to the implementation of opportunities for our properties. And in a couple more slides, I'll further explain how we approach prioritizing our portfolio for these opportunities. Next slide, please. So this leads us to the question of how do we scale the identification of audits, rebates, and incentives for our properties? Through leveraging platforms like Incentify, conducting our own internal research, and collaborating with our vendors, we've been very successful in identifying and implementing energy efficiency projects. Since the beginning of 2023, 28% of our properties have received free energy and/or water audits, which has led to over $885,000 of rebates. And not included in these rebates are the number of free direct install programs we've been able to take advantage of, which cover things like LED lighting, low flow fixtures, and smart thermostats. So how did we get there? Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, efficiency opportunities are investigated during our due diligence process for all new acquisitions. And in 2024, we implemented a new process of commissioning an energy audit for properties that are more than 5 years old to help further supplement our internal research and property condition assessments. Any of the opportunities that get identified through this ESG scorecard during due diligence are then integrated into each property's business plan upon Berkshire assuming ownership. When we move into operation, there are two main ways that Berkshire prioritizes properties for audits and efficiency projects. The first being we review all of our properties that are in compliance regions that also happen to have building performance requirements. And then we look at properties that are showing at least a 10% increase in energy use since baseline, which is something that we're able to track via our internal quarterly reporting. So once we identify properties that have programs available to them, we can work with our asset and portfolio management teams to help them understand program requirements and opportunities, and we can get their approval before moving forward. The utility programs that you see on the right, like Austin Energy and Bay Ren, these are some of the most successful programs that we've been able to work with so far. I will say that one caveat is that the utility audits can vary in their rigor and level of ongoing support. Some audits are just desktop assessments, whereas others are closer to an ASHRAE level 2 audit of support, and many of them fall somewhere in between. I will say that a majority of the audits we've been able to receive have been in-person free audits from the utilities themselves, which has been fantastic. And regardless of these prioritization criteria, we always pursue audits and efficiency measures if they are free. So through these utility programs, not all of which are listed on this slide, 33 of the 38 audits that we've received since the beginning of 2023 have been at no cost to Berkshire. Next slide, please. So now that we've identified the properties where we want to get audits, how do we review the opportunities? This flow chart here outlines our general process. So in summary, once the assessor has visited the property, the sustainability team will take a first pass at the report and share a summary with the property team, regional management, and asset and portfolio management. If there are any clarifying questions about equipment specs, costs, or other aspects of the report, that's when we'll schedule a call with the provider to talk through those. And from there, the sustainability team works with asset and portfolio management to select which measures to proceed with, and we sign the necessary paperwork to begin work. That's when we transfer the bulk of the project management to the site teams, who then coordinate with vendors to actually schedule the installations. And this process works for one-off audits that we've identified our properties may be eligible for, but what do we do when multiple properties are eligible for the same program? This was the case when we ran an Incentify report in 2023 that covered 10 of our properties. If you could go to the next slide, please. So for those of you who are not familiar, the Incentify platform searches for all possible city, state, federal, and utility programs that offer rebates, tax incentives, grants, and other forms of support for efficiency opportunities. So we ran reports for 10 of our properties back in 2023. We picked an indicative property of each of the major markets that we operate in, and we then mapped those reports to our entire property list, and we were able to identify opportunities that covered about 40% of our portfolio. So the sustainability team took these 10 reports and turned them into an Excel summary for asset and portfolio management, and that's the screenshot that you're seeing on this slide. And this allows asset and portfolio managers to then search by incentive type and utility category, among other criteria. And the sustainability team can then work with asset and portfolio management to pursue any of the projects that may be of interest. Next slide, please. So while these conversations about property eligibility are happening on a rolling basis, the sustainability team also holds fund level budget conversations with asset and portfolio management to discuss several ESG initiatives of interest for the coming calendar year. This screenshot to the right of this slide comes directly from our budget presentation we shared last month. You can see that it's covering utility audits and efficiency projects that have been completed to date, as well as outlining any opportunities. It also touches on renewable energy, and other topics are covered in these budget conversations as well, such as EV charging and green building certifications. So these discussions are a great touch point with our teams to not only celebrate our ESG progress to date and get alignment on which initiatives are on the table for the coming year. And we found them to be really productive and helpful in getting ESG integrated at the asset level. With that, thank you for your time, and I will pass it back to Craig to start the Q&A session.